to understand how these dimensions are connected to each other. Carson uses the idea of dimensions being at right angles to each other. In a world with only two dimensions, like a piece of paper, you have length and width. Now add depth, and you've stepped into the three-dimensional world where we live. But what about a fourth dimension? How does that fit in? Thinking about another dimension beyond our three is tricky because it's not something we can see or experience. But let's use our imaginations. Imagine time as a sort of fourth dimension. We move through time just like we move through space, experiencing each moment one after the other. Carson also talks about dimensions being compactified. This is a fancy way of saying they're folded up so small that we can't see them. Picture a very thin wire.
No such thing as time, but just go with it just for sake understand what he's saying.
From a distance, it looks like a simple line, one-dimensional. But if you look closer, you can see it has length. And if you could look even closer, you'd see it has thickness, and even a tiny bit of width. The extra dimensions in string theory are like this, but even smaller. So small that we don't notice them in our daily lives. These hidden dimensions could be all around us, filled with things we can't even begin to imagine. It's like if you lived in a two-dimensional world and suddenly discovered there's a whole three-dimensional world above, below, and all around you. This idea opens up a universe of possibilities, where countless different realities might exist right next to ours, just out of sight. The concept of time in higher dimensions.
And you will discover that. You just did, but I mean, on a whole nother level, you're going to discover that because you remember everything on day remembrance, which is going to be a hypernova, not a supernova. Y'all get it right.
Imagine time as a river flowing from the past to the future. This is how we usually understand time, but what if time was more like an ocean, where past, present, and future exist all at once? Billy Carson introduces us to this fascinating concept, suggesting that in higher dimensions, time doesn't work the way we think it does. In our three-dimensional world, we experience time linearly. One thing happens after another. But in higher dimensions, time could be experienced differently. It's a bit like watching a parade from the street versus watching it from a tall building. From the street, you see the parade one float at a time as it passes by. But from the building, you can see the entire parade all at once. Carson talks about beings from a fifth dimension who might see our three-dimensional world in a way we can't imagine. For them, looking at us might be looking at a book where they can see every page at the same time. They can see us in multiple places, our past, present, and future simultaneously.
There are higher selves of ourselves, of ourselves on the fifth dimension, but there are also things there like reptilians and stuff like that there in those dimensions too, on the fifth dimension, just to let you know. So you want to go way higher than that. Way, way higher than that. You want to have us, only us. Nothing else.
This idea challenges our usual understanding of time and suggests a universe where time is far more complex and multidimensional than our everyday experience. Interactions between different dimensions. Now, how do these different dimensions interact with each other? Carson suggests that to see or interact with a higher dimension, one needs to match its frequency. This is like tuning into a radio station. Just as you need to be on the right frequency to hear a particular radio station, beings in one dimension need to tune into the frequency of another to interact with it. In our everyday life, this is hard to grasp because everything we touch.
Do not try this at home until the day of remembrance, please. Otherwise, you will mess around and mess with a dimension that you shouldn't have no part of, or get into the dimension that where some of us are actually at, but there also are some bad things there too, and you don't want to take a chance like that. So do not try that at home. Make sure you only wait till day of remembrance and things will happen. Remember that.
See is in our three-dimensional world. But what if we could tune into these other dimensions? Carson suggests that the paranormal could be explained by beings who have figured out how to do this, to match the frequencies of different dimensions. Think about atoms, which are mostly empty space. If we could somehow match hotels that frequency of our atoms to the frequency of a wall's atoms, we might be able to pass through it. This sounds like something out of a superhero movie, but in the realm of physics, it's a...
You can definitely try that. Nothing wrong with you trying that right there. Just don't be trying to go to certain dimensions and, you know what I mean, run into entities that basically want to kill you. Okay?
Theoretical possibility. It suggests that what we consider solid and unmovable in our world could be more flexible and permeable than we ever imagined. Quantum physics and higher dimensions. Quantum physics might sound like a complex and distant concept, but think of it as the rule book for how things work on a really, really small scale, much smaller than anything we can see. In Carson's discussion, this microscopic world reveals the existence of higher dimensions. In quantum physics, particles do some pretty wild things. They can be in more than one place at the same time, and they can pop in and out of existence without warning. Now imagine particles as tiny messengers traveling between dimensions. When quantum physicists observe these particles, they sometimes find them behaving in ways that don't make sense in our three-dimensional world. This is because these particles could be influenced by forces or laws from these higher dimensions. Just like a puppeteer's strings can control a puppet's movements from above, these higher dimensions could be influencing the particles we see in our world. This idea shakes the very foundations of what we understand about our universe. It suggests that the universe is like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and quantum physics is showing us pieces from parts of the puzzle that we didn't even know existed. It's as if we're getting a sneak peek into a hidden realm, opening doors to new worlds that operate under completely different rules than our own. The human brain, quantum mechanics, and dimensional phasing. The human brain is an amazing organ, but imagine if it had abilities beyond what we know. Carson suggests that our brain synapses, the tiny gaps between neurons where signals pass through, might actually be tapping into these higher dimensions. Think of your brain as a radio, not just picking up signals from our world, but also tuning into frequencies from these other dimensions. This might sound like science fiction, but in the world of quantum mechanics, it's a possibility that scientists are beginning to explore. There's evidence to suggest that these synapses are involved in processes that defy conventional physics, like being affected by quantum entanglement, a phenomenon where particles remain connected so that actions performed on one affect the other, no matter the distance between them. Carson's idea here is that our thoughts might sometimes phase in and out of these higher dimensions. It's like when you daydream and part of your mind wanders off to a different place. What if, in those moments, your mind is actually interacting with another dimension? This could explain moments of extraordinary inspiration or creativity, as if we're tapping into a vast network of knowledge and experience that exists beyond our physical realm. The universe as a shadow of higher dimensions. Imagine if our entire universe was just a shadow cast by a much more complex reality existing in higher dimensions. This idea, as Carson suggests, is looking at the shadow of a tree and trying to imagine the tree itself. The shadow is a simpler, two-dimensional version of something much more intricate. In this analogy, our universe is the shadow, and the higher dimensions are the tree. The concept of a light matrix comes into play here. Think of it as a vast network or web of light, stretching out in all directions far beyond what we can see or understand. This light matrix represents the higher dimensions, and our universe is a projection or a shadow of this much more complex structure. It's as if we're living in a 3D movie projected from a realm that's far more advanced and multidimensional. This perspective shifts our understanding of reality. Instead of seeing our universe as the entirety of existence, we can start to view it as just one level or aspect of something much larger and more intricate. It suggests that what we experience as reality might just be a small slice of a much vaster, multidimensional cosmos. Quasicrystals and dimensional shadows. Quasicrystals are a perfect example to illustrate this concept. These are structures that are incredibly ordered, yet don't repeat themselves like normal crystals. Think of it like a complex mosaic pattern that never exactly repeats. Scientists have created quasicrystals in the lab that are projections of higher dimensional patterns. When Carson talks about an eighth dimensional quasicrystal casting a shadow to a lower dimension, he's referring to how these complex structures.
So some of y'all asking why they doing that? Because they try to understand you. They trying to figure you out. They're trying to do that on the ether level because that's what you really are. And they know it, and they have learned that by beating you up down here and beating you up anywhere else, it don't matter. They still lose. Anything they do, game over, they lose. So they basically trying to figure out you. When I say you, I'm talking about us, the ether, because we're only one. So we're trying to figure out it, which is the ether, which is, we're all part of it, our people anyway. But listen, the whole point is they trying to defeat you on your highest level. They trying to figure out how to beat you on your highest level. All right.